Hey there, math fans. Watch my previous video if you want to see the visuals for how much light you're going to get in a given day, the solstice, the equinox. I made several visuals. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the math. Some of this is just pre-calculus. Some of it requires a little bit about vectors and calculus 3. But let's just do a quick kind of run through of how this relates to some of our math courses. So if you take our calculus 3 course, you'll learn about dot products. And you'll learn that dot products sort of indirectly give you information about the angle between two vectors. I always call this the 10-star fact because we use it so much. But anytime you can formulate something into vectors, you can then find the angle of them as long as they're tail to tail. And then if you rearrange that, you can actually find this thing called a projection. Okay. So the short version is if you want to figure out the amount of daylight you're trying to figure out as you rotate around the top, or whatever your latitude is. Here's Seattle right here. Here's its angle of latitude, which we are going to call phi, which is 47 degrees. And that rotates around. Sometimes it's in the dark, sometimes it's not. So we have to figure out the relationship between that angle and all the other angles where the sun is. So here's a vector that points towards the sun. So we're going to put several vectors together, use projection, get our formula. That's the short answer. But there's a lot of different angles here. There's an angle we're tilted, the axial tilt angle. That's 23 degrees. There's an angle here, how much the sun is above or below the equator. That's called the angle of declination. Again, all of these things I've just read up on. And then we have the angle that's our latitude. Okay, it turns out that based off of these two things alone, you can figure out how much daylight you're going to have. I never realized that. So again, a lot of it boils down to projections. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to find a vector. So this little angle here, cosine of this angle, sine of that angle is the same as cosine of 90 minus that angle, or this angle up here. These are 90 degrees here. Anyways, would be the dot product between the following two vectors. A being a vector that points this way. And it took me a long time to read through it carefully, so I would encourage you to use a 3D visual like I did. Draw some of these vectors. But this is this vector A, and this is this vector S. So S points from the center of the Earth towards the sun, and A points in the direction of the axis of rotation. So the goal is to find the dot product of those two things. I guess in this case it isn't 90 minus, but there's some symmetry we can use. So the formula they give as their starting place is this formula. I just wanted to give a plausible reason for why it's sine instead of cosine, and it's because the angle they have is sort of on the complement side. Anyways, they're going to choose a unit vector. So this is going to be 1. A is going to be this vector. Again, a lot of rearranging, choosing how you do sine and cosine. You can think of this as the z-axis and this as the x. And so these are their coordinates relative to that angle. Again, that's for you to think about. But the point is it's using that same sine and cosine circular motion type thing. If you want to talk about the Earth moving around the sun, we know how to do that in our pre-calculus course. We know that you need some sort of starting angle. We know that you need the angular speed. We actually know what the angular speed here is. It's 2 pi over 365.24. So we can actually model that. So here's where we're making our assumptions. We're assuming it's a circular orbit, which isn't 100% accurate, but is good enough to give a pretty good number. And I'm going to show you I made a table of values and compared them with actual values. I'm going to do this at the end. So the short answer is we need to take the dot product of these two things. We actually want the vector that points the other way because we want it to go from here to here. I made it a unit vector. Normally we'd have the radius in here, but I made it a unit vector. Okay, so anyways, in the end, you get the following. That sine of delta equals negative this times this. And then it's 0 times that and 0 times that. So you get the following relationship. That it's negative sine of epsilon, the axial tilt, times cosine of omega t plus theta naught. And I know I've headed off the screen here. So there we go. That's that relationship. And everything essentially comes from here. So this gives you the precise formula, and you can hit the inverse sine button and you can write what you get. But often, because the angles you're dealing with in radians are really small, we use the following fact that sine of x is approximately equal to x. Now I only mention that because that's actually doing some Taylor series. We can even give an error bound. And so I wrote this down just because it would be interesting for my Calculus 3 students, which again is my goal in these things, is you would, in Calculus 3, you learn how to approximate sine, and you even learn how to get an error bound on a given interval. And on the given interval, the error is like 0.01. So the error is pretty small. So what we're going to do to give a pretty, and you might say, well, this is large, but it turns out to be pretty accurate, is we're going to replace this by delta. And we're going to replace this. So I mostly wanted to do this because, hey, that's a nice, quick application of Taylor series mixed into this discussion. Okay. Now, when I searched online, I found that often this is written in terms of sine. So it's often written as follows. So they flip this, they write sine, they change the initial angle correspondingly. I think that would be 90 minus that angle. There's always this problem that anything that can be written in terms of cosine or sine can also be written in terms of sine. And that gives the angle of declination. And that turns out to be extremely accurate. I looked at sort of the best models and this model, and they're very close together. So I'll probably use this in the future for a sinusoidal model that is really accurate. So the way in which the angle of declination changes is about a sinusoidal model. All right, that was a lot, but I sort of like that overlaps with several things. Circular motion, which we do in our pre-calculus class, sinusoidal modeling, which we do in our pre-calculus class, projections, which we do in Calculus 3, Taylor series, which we also do in Calculus 3. So a little exercise in how several things we use. So then, what about the other piece of the story? Well, now we're going to look at sort of from above. Here we have Seattle, viewed from above, and it's also doing circular motion. But where does it start? How close is it to the middle? And so that's where we use the fact that, okay, we have our phi, which tells us where Seattle is relative to the equator. And from that, we can write the radius times cosine of phi, the radius times sine of phi. Sorry, I wrote that too small, 0. Yes, let me see. No, I miswrote. I realize now when I wrote that, because this is the z-axis and this is the x-axis. So that would be radius cosine of phi, 0, radius sine of phi. So that's that circular motion. Not circular motion, that's the coordinate where you'd be starting. And then we want to rotate. So this is the side view. This is the above view. How do we rotate? There's actually a really nice way to do that. You take whichever coordinates, in this case it's these two coordinates, and you multiply by sine and cosine in an appropriate way depending on the angle. that angle we're going to call h. It's like angles per hour. So it turns out if you multiply this times cosine and this times sine and add them together, you get the following. And then you do something similar with sine to get the other coordinate. So these two are the rotated versions of this. A lot to be said there, but I just wanted to give a little bit of, that's it. And that's how I actually did it in Desmos. I rotated. I gave that coordinate. And if you study spherical coordinates, things like this come up. Okay, lots of stuff there. So now we have the angles accounted for. The angle that has to do with latitude and the angle of declination. We can give now a vector based off of this angle for pointing at the sun. And we, I know it's a lot of stuff. Excuse me. So now we get to the last little bit, which is the condition. So what does it mean to be in sunlight? Well, we need the angle between this vector. This is the vector that points to Seattle. And this vector, this is the angle that points towards the sun. We need that angle to be smaller than 90 degrees. If it's bigger than 90 degrees, we're not going to be able to see the sun. That's it. So it's this little condition that we're going to figure out when this vector and this vector are perpendicular. And then on one side of that, you will be in daylight, and one side you're not. That's a nice little exploration from Calculus 3. So I really, like I said, my goal is to show you all these places that overlap with our courses and how I had to use them to understand this. Okay, so in order for this to be 0, we're going to have this dotted with this dotted with that, this dotted with this. Those have to add up to be 0. So you get the radius of the Earth times cosine of phi times cosine of h. It's that rotation angle. Times cosine of delta, that's the angle of declination, plus RE sine of phi, sine of delta, has to be 0. So then what can we conclude by this? Well, we can divide everything by R sub E, by the radius. We can also write, let's do it in 2 steps. And sorry, I know this is not tantalizing. Let me know if anyone's still watching. Okay, I think we could, so let's organize this a little bit. Divide to make that a tangent. Divide to make that a tangent. Looks a little different than what I was expecting. Well, anyways, let's see what we get. So I get tangent of phi, tangent of delta, cosine of h equals -1. Oh no, I flipped it. That would be cotangent. That makes a lot more sense to me. Sine over cosine. I don't know why. Okay, so this is what I wanted. For some reason it didn't look right to me. Now I get it. This is our relationship. And we would like to know the h value when it actually hits. That would be when you hit the edge. That's that h value, that rotation angle. Let me use a different color so you can see it. Again, sorry I don't have this more polished up. Go to your astronomy teacher. So we hit the inverse cosine button, and we have it. And that's this formula. This is the formula. So the formula here, this actually gives you the angle. So that's the angle when you stop seeing sunlight. If you divide that by pi, you get the fraction. What percentage from 0 to 180 that is. And then if you multiply times 24, that's your number of daylight hours. So I found that pretty interesting that it's just those two pieces. Now, there's some interesting things to ask, like what if negative tangent of phi tangent of delta is greater than 1? Then it's undefined, but I calculated several things. So I went through, here's for the most amount of, but using this formula, the maximum daylight for Seattle or different locations. And then I compared it with true values. And each, I was off by, it's about 5 to 10 minutes that it's off from the true value. And I found that sort of interesting. But it's based off of like atmospheric refraction, which allows you to see the light a little longer. So all of my estimates are low estimates of the time amount of light you'll see by a pretty similar amount. They're all off by like 12 minutes around that. Okay, so I wanted to finish by showing, so I hope that was interesting. That's a little more technical. But again, I figured all this out using pre-calculus and calculus 3. So here's my visual of this. I find this function really interesting. Again, I never had studied this before this last week. So here we go. This is it. That's that function using 35 degrees. You can see the solstice here. At that time of year, they see 60% light. If I change the latitude to the equator, it's the same amount of light all year long. If I change it to Seattle, it's this function. So I'm just plotting the function with that given latitude and how many hours of daylight we get. So the interesting thing is if the latitude gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you get to about 67%, it breaks. I found that really interesting to look at that function. And you can see also my circle got smaller because it's closer to the top, the polar cap. So anyways, found that really interesting. That means you have full daylight in this time, as you might already know. Okay, hope you found that interesting. Give me a like or subscribe. I have a whole another discussion to do about the phases of the moon. Let me know if that's interesting.